guys, it's Jim here with another Vinyl Kaiju review. Today we have a subscriber requested review of my Marmit Vinyl Paradise Chiller exclusive Showa King Ghidorah. I can't remember the user's name, but I'm going to put it in the video description, so don't worry. Anyway, this sculpt was produced in 1998. The standard release had orange vinyl with silver and white highlights, and there was also a blue version that was based on an earlier concept of King Ghidorah before they had ultimately decided that it was going to be a gold monster. This, however, is the 2001 Chiller exclusive King Ghidorah, which apparently was limited to 100 pieces, according to Club Tokyo. I don't know if that's accurate, because this wasn't that expensive of a toy, and I also know another collector who has one, so Club Tokyo says it. I'm inclined to believe them, but take it for what you will. To get into reviewing the figure itself, one of the things you'll notice first is that the mold is not exactly film accurate. With the Vinyl Paradise line, Marmit was going for a feel really for adult collectors trying to evoke what it feels like to be a kid and have a toy in your hand, and thus the mold is rather bulky. It feels like a big toy in your hands. It's made for adults, and it brings back that reminiscent feeling of having a toy when you're a kid, when it feels almost like it's too big for your hand in some ways. That's the way a lot of the older Bull Marks and Marathon figures were, and this is the feel that the Marmit Vinyl Paradise line is going for. Now, for sculpt details, I actually think this is a pretty nice figure, especially in the face details. Let's see if I can get in close here so you can see that. There's a lot of detail on these faces. They actually rather look like the Shisa that you might see at Japanese temples, I think. Of course, there's also some of the Chinese dragon in there. I'm not sure if the horns curving forward like that is quite screen accurate, but it actually looks pretty nice on this figure. Another thing that's kind of funny is that you have the very toothy grin on this Ghidorah, which makes it go along nicely with the Godzilla that came out earlier from the same series. They both have the same kind of smile, so they look nice next to each other, so I'm kind of glad to have both. You may notice that the tail and the wings are rather stubby on this figure. Definitely not as billowing and impressive as some other figures like the Giga Brain, for example. But this is a stylized figure, and it's done intentionally, so you can give it a pass for that. It's going for a specific look. I'm not going to criticize the small wings. I will have to criticize, however, the tail, mostly because due to the way the figure leans forward, if you can see from this angle, and the smallness of the tail, and just the way the legs work, it tends to tip forward sometimes if you don't have it balanced just right. That's probably the one thing that bothers me the most about this figure. Another thing you might critique is the way the neck is sculpted. We've got a separate piece here in the middle between the body, the torso, and the necks. And that functions for extra articulation, but it does kind of interrupt the mold. Not the most appealing aspect of the figure, but I can overlook it. I like a lot of other things about it. Okay, now, people like to know about articulation. This one's fairly minimal, but it does have a couple cool things. You've got the legs. I don't know if you want to force them 360. I don't care about that. If you have one, you can go ahead and try it. But the cool thing is that the separate piece here can move all of the heads together at once. So you can kind of get all three heads at once looking in a different direction if you're into that. You can see he's kind of tilting a little bit there, but he's still staying up. So that's cool, but in addition to that, you can also move each one of the heads individually. Now, as is often the case with a Ghidorah, the middle head does not move as much on its own because it bumps into the other two heads, so you've got minimal articulation on that middle head. But for a figure of this type, that's really not bad articulation. You can put him up in some different poses if you like. Okay, and to get into the vinyl itself, this is actually an improvement over earlier Marmit Vinyl Paradise figures. Compared to this Godzilla, it's got pretty good vinyl. These older figures are rather thin. The vinyl feels kind of brittle. I feel like if it fell off a shelf, that one might break. Whereas with this Ghidorah, the vinyl is actually pretty solid. It's stiff. It feels like it's a little bit thicker than this one. I don't have any worries about it shattering into several pieces if it were to hit the ground. You might get some scratches, but it's heavier and just more solid than the earlier Vinyl Paradise figures. So it's a marked improvement over Marmit's earliest pieces. The color of this vinyl is described as burgundy on Club Tokyo. So yeah, I guess it's kind of a deep, dark red. I think it looks very nice, and the paint job looks especially nice on it because you've got gold highlights all over, and then you've got the red, white, and blue wings. Maybe that was intentional since this was a US exclusive figure. Very appealing, I think. Now, scale-wise, this is quite a large figure. He's probably about 10 inches tall. And if you're really into scaling figures, this isn't going to be a great one because even with figures of its own line, although they look nice together, the scale just isn't quite right. I don't know. Godzilla looks. I mean, it's the shape of the figure. It's the style. This Godzilla looks rather bulky, a little bit too tall compared to Ghidorah, I'd say. But nonetheless, they look nice together. Now, compared to a 6-inch line, here is Bandai's Jet Jaguar. Obviously, this Ghidorah is a much larger figure. Now, to compare to another Ghidorah of somewhat similar scale, here is the Pilot Ace figure, which, as you can see, is a good deal larger. Back up the camera a little bit. Yeah, as you can see, he barely even fits into the frame. He's huge. So, I mean, it's kind of a mid-range, large-scale Ghidorah. It's a little bit bigger than the Bandai's. It's probably a little bit taller than the Grand King Ghidorah 2, if I had to hazard a guess. But its wingspan isn't as impressive as the Giga Brain or even the Pilot Ace. Okay, so overall, I think this figure has some flaws. We talked about the balance problem. We talked a bit about some problems with the sculpt, the interference of this metal neck piece, the shortened tails. But on the whole, I think there's a lot of things to say in its favor. The paint looks very nice. The sculpt is, except for the exceptions noted, very nice. And it just has a lot of charm. It's a very appealing looking figure if you're into this style. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I'm very fond of this figure, but I cannot deny some of its faults. I paid, I think, about $60 or $70 plus shipping for it. Another collector was going to sell me his, but I think he wanted more. He never gave me a quote. So if you're buying it secondhand off of someone, you might be looking at more. So I'm going to say between the $70 and $100 range on this guy. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. I'll have another one coming up for you soon, and if there's something from my collection that you want to see reviewed, or if you have a question about anything, be sure to leave a comment. Thanks for checking it out, and I'll see you guys next time.